Hello everybody, CBPY here, and today we will be talking about the Czechoslovakian variant tanks in Call to Arms Gates of Hell Ostfront. You may also know them as a Panzer 35 and 38T series. They have been turned into a lot of things: tank destroyers, versatile, fast, light tanks, but overall they are just a really good platform. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, before World War II, the German army realized that their armored fighting vehicles were severely underpowered. At the time, they were using the Panzer I and the Panzer II as their main tanks, but these tanks could not even effectively penetrate modern tank armor. So they decided to look to different countries to get their new fighting vehicles, specifically Czechoslovakia. You see, before World War II, the Czechoslovakians made two different types of light tanks: the Skoda LT VZ35 and the Skoda LT VZ38. Both of these tanks eventually became the German Army's Panzer 35 and 38, and they were used to great effect since they didn't really have enough materials to create sufficient amounts of Panzer 3s and 4s. Because these tanks could be produced so numerously, they serviced the German Army until the end of World War II. They were armed with the much more powerful KWK-38T cannon, which was miles better than the German Army's own tank cannons, being the 2cm KWK-30. And on top of that, this tank could be turned into many different variations. Of course, there was the Marder 3, a open-top tank destroyer variant, and the Jagdpanzer 38T, a closed-top tank destroyer variant, which was also named the Hetzer. The German army also made an artillery piece on the Jagdpanzer 38T's chassis, that being the Grill aus K, with a 15cm artillery piece. It was also converted to shoot the 3cm Mark 103 cannon. This tank serviced the army very well. All the way from the invasion of France to the fall of Berlin, this tank was there for everything. Not only does its cheap quality allow it to be able to be manufactured quite quickly, but it's also a solid tank just for that. So as you know, the Czechoslovakian tanks have many variants, so let's get started on all the variants for the Panzer 38 and 35. So here we have the Panzer 35T. Now this tank has a max operational range of 230 kilometers. On top of that, its top speed is 34 kilometers. It's armed with the 3.7cm Pak 34 RT cannon and two MG37 machine guns. One has the coaxial machine gun and one mounted onto the hull for taking down other infantry units. Now, what makes this tank worthy of use? Well, it is a bit longer range, operational range compared to the Panzer 38s, but on top of that, it's pretty weak to AT rifles still, and it's basically just a cheaper Panzer 38, and I would actually recommend that you use this thing, but the Panzer 38 is still better. Next, we have the Panzer 38T. Now, remember when I said that the Panzer 35 and the 38 are very similar? Yeah, this is where it comes in. Essentially, the Panzer 38 is a slightly faster but less fuel efficient version of the Panzer 35 with a bit more penetration. It has an operational range of about 200 kilometers and goes 42 kilometers an hour max speed. On top of that, it's armed with the 3.7cm KWK-38T cannon instead, with a bit more penetration. It still retains its two MG37s, so you still have that type of infantry support. The armor is quite the same compared to the Panzer 35. Instead of 4 to 25 or 5 to 25 hull armor, it has 8 to 25. I also wanted to mention that these tanks are surprisingly really good at slinging HE shells, especially the 3.7cm gun variants. These guys not only get a ton of shells, but on top of this, their reload is really quick. The tank gun also services you quite well against other tanks like the Soviet T-37 and BT series, as well as the T-26s. It has a max range of 100 meters, which isn't really good in tank standards, but it'll get you pretty far in the beginning. Also, on top of this, it can also do some nice damage to US tanks like the M3 Stuart series, or tank destroyers like the M10 and M18 GMC. To say that this tank line, being the first tank line where the first variant actually gets a cannon is a relief is an understatement. It really is quite revolutionary that we finally have a cannon that will actually do something against not only infantry but tanks. Next up we have the Panzer 38T Ausf F. Now this one is a bit different from the Ausf A in terms of armor. It goes from 4 to 25 on hull and 8 to 25 on turret to 8 to 50 for both hull and turret. Other than that, this thing is not really that different compared to the Ausf A. Although that doesn't go away from the fact that this tank is actually better than the Ausf A, and I would actually go as far to say that this tank is actually a better variant in late war than the Ausf A ever would be. This tank could fulfill roles such as infantry support, reconnaissance, and all that, and it could be just your standard light tank for your army. And yeah, other than that, this tank is actually quite impressive, even though it is pretty similar to the Ausf A. Next up we have the Ausf G version. Now this version is essentially just a tan recolor of the Ausf F with a sort of German flag on top of it, and this variant surprisingly has a bit more penetration than all the others, even though there's literally nothing different about its gun or its shells. I also forgot to mention that all of these tanks get 3 types of shells: high explosive, APHE, and APCR. Now, would I recommend this tank for you to use in long-term use? Not really. I mean, like, it's literally just a tan recolor with 4 meters more penetration of, you know, damage. Other than that, like, this tank is basically just a Panzer 38T Ausf F, just different looking. That's basically it. There's literally nothing different about this tank other than the way it looks, and it's essentially, like, similar to the late war T-34s for the Russians, where they just get a different like look. Next up we have the Marder 3 Ausf M, which is a late war variant of the Marder 3 tank destroyer built on the Panzer 38's chassis. Now this tank destroyer gets a 7.5 centimeter Pak 40 gun, and on top of this, its penetration is not half bad. It's about 110 to 115 millimeters of penetration with 47 kilometers an hour max speed and an operational range of around 280 kilometers before you run out of fuel. Now, this tank doesn't really get a lot of shells, but the gun is pretty fast to reload. On top of this, this tank's armor is not very good, and it's an open top tank destroyer. So this tank really benefits from infantry being around it to help stop it from being killed, from the whole crew being killed. Now, I will note a cool thing about this tank is that every single time it shoots, you can see the shells fall on the floor. Other than that, this tank is actually a very solid tank destroyer. Not only could you get this thing very early and very quickly, but this will service you even until late war tanks. This tank destroyer really is a jack of all trades, and honestly, other than that, my only complaints is that there's not enough armor on it. And there's also not a lot of shells, so make sure you have a supply truck nearby to rearm this thing. Next up we have the interesting 3 centimeter Mark 103 Grail Ausf M. This is essentially a Marder 3, but the main 7.5 centimeter Pak 40 cannon is replaced with a 3 centimeter cannon similar to the ME262's cannon. Now granted, this one is a Mark 103, not a Mark 108. But oh boy, when you come across a horde of enemies, yeah, this cannon hits different. Now, next up we have the Grill Ausf K. Probably butchered that. Basically, there's nothing special about this. It's basically just a Marder 3 with a 15 centimeter or 150 millimeter gun on it. That's literally it. It's just a self-propelled artillery piece. It's basically just a Marder 3 with a big gun. Although one of the redeeming features of it is that thunk you hear when you shoot it. Yeah, that's really good, and just getting like 50 different kills after that. Now here's one that's not easy to get. This is the Jagdpanzer 38T. Now essentially this vehicle is not really easy to get. You have to grind the whole entire Stug 3 line, or at least until the Stug 3F, which requires you to grind the Panzer 3 line. So yeah, getting this thing is just a pain. Other than that, it's got 40 kilometers speed. It has a good max operation range, and the 75 millimeter Pak 39 can penetrate up to 140 millimeters of armor. So yeah, it still is a really good tank destroyer. Other than that, the sloped armor is great, and I'm not grinding that much to get it. So here's some gameplay of it in skirmish. Hello again. Yes, it's me. Now, I would like to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe, because this took way too long for somebody who has zero editing skills. So, please, like, comment, subscribe. Again, I know I'm getting repetitive, and maybe next time I won't have to talk to you with a stock image of a man in a suit with my profile picture over it. Anyways, check out these videos.